I would like to introduce, he is a renowned, esteemed journalist and author. Books The Irish Gulag, which tackled the subject of industrial schools. The Fight for Democracy, subject of which is one of our guests that will appear later on, Mr. LiteCoin. Our speaker is a Fellow of Trinity College Dublin, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, an Honorary Member of the Royal Hibernian Academy, and also holding an Honorary Doctorate from University College Dublin. And I would, without further ado, like to introduce you to Mr. Bruce Arnold, everybody.
Thank you very much, Kate. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Light means sacking by the editor of the Sunday Independent, for whom I was writing articles mainly in support of Brexit. And it wasn't the fashion of the paper at that time to publish such articles, and I was dropped from the staff. It showed something in journalism which I hadn't met so strongly before, which is a failure to have complete balance by the editorial direction of a newspaper and to allow eccentric views to be put forward if that is what the journalists they employ wish to do. Instead of that, the paper adopted a particular line, not a line that I approved of, and that led to my departure from the staff. So it brought to an end 50 years as a journalist in this country. Some of the highlights of which I'd just like to advert to briefly. There will come a time later in today's discussions when I hope Declan Gandy will be here and will be able to talk about his impact on journalism and on politics in Ireland and on changing the minds of people in Ireland, which he was very effective at doing. And I'm glad he is on his way here and that we will discuss that. One of the most troubling and difficult jobs I undertook began as journalism and ended in the writing of a book about the industrial school situation in Ireland. 62 schools spread across every county in the country, filled with children who were starved, beaten, ill-treated, not educated, their teeth not attended to, and they suffered from the impact of that method of looking after them, which lasted the whole of their lives. I knew them, some of them, during the time when they were elderly men, and certainly some of them died when I was still writing about the Irish Gulag. And their testimony to me was deeply and lastingly poignant. I would like to write again about that subject because I still think it lingers over the country in a shameful way. Earlier than that, I had a happier time in journalism. I was a friend of Charles Haughey at the beginning of his political career. I wrote speeches for him. He lived in a house that my wife's uncle's family had owned for 100 years. And I went there to tell him a little bit about their life at Abbeyville, and only when he ran into trouble politically and in connection with an arms crisis that he was behind did we part company as friends, and I turned my attention to examining him as a politician and writing confrontational articles which made him very angry, made him tap my telephone as well as that of Geraldine Kennedy, and gave me a notoriety that I'm not sure I'm very happy to live with for the rest of my life. But nevertheless, that was part of my upbringing as a journalist and part of the determination that I felt journalists have to have, which is to tell the total truth and to tell it irrespective of the views of the paper that he is writing for. I want to give you one up-to-date example and end with that. I read, of course, with great concern about the defeat of Theresa May in respect of her cabinet when she had completed her document for leaving the EU. One of the articles was made up of views that she had expressed early during the campaign about what she was trying to achieve. And the article then ran with what she had achieved in the document. And it made painful reading, because what was left out of it was the role played by the EU. All the things that were raised as comments about her speeches were delivered in derision of her expectation and in the fulfillment of a list of demands made by the EU, which Britain, of course, cannot accept. I don't think that the document that she presented this week is other than some kind of ploy to bring honesty and correct interpretation into the battle of wills that's going on in the House of Commons at this time. But nobody wrote about it. I sat and read the piece and thought to myself, the blame for this situation rests with the EU. They repeatedly loaded her shoulders with things she could not deliver, and they were at odds with things she had espoused as objectives for herself as leader of the government. So we are left with that vacuum where the EU went silent, and when nobody noticed that they had gone silent and said, but the EU are responsible for what has happened to her. It's not herself. It's not her mistakes. It's the EU that have formed around her proposals incredibly difficult points to address and put right. I'm waiting for the outrun from that situation, and I remain, as I have been since Cameron led us into the referendum, fully in support of Britain leaving. I hope they will achieve it one way or the other, and it gives strength and heart to the people I'm addressing here today, whose interest in detachment from the EU is more than just an interest. It has an emotional tug to it, which I fully endorse.
To our next speaker of the evening. So, our speaker has been involved, and some of you will know him mostly for this, while others of you will know he's quite a long biography as well. But the landmark High Court cases, namely Crotty, McKenna and Pringle, which changed the course of how elections are run and how media must and how the government must publicise and inform the public. He's also a seasoned academic, secretary of the National Platform for EU Research and Information Centre, retired senior lecturer in social policy at Trinity College Dublin, frequent guest in the past on RTE's Questions and Answers. Some of you will definitely know him from that. He has also opposed EU enlargement, the EU treaties, the Single European Act, the Maastricht Treaty, Amsterdam Treaty, the Nice Treaty and the Nice Rerun and the Lisbon Treaties. Made submissions to the Oireachtas Committee on Europe on behalf of the National Platform. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Anthony Coughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and friends. I'm very honoured to have the chance of talking here today at this significant meeting. I think Irexit Freedom to Prosper is a very important new initiative. It's early days, but it's certainly meeting a lack, and I think it will go far over periods ahead and the years to come. I've been at this EU critical business for many a long year. I've always been opposed to the development of a supranational thing in Europe on democratic and internationalist grounds. Democracy, in my opinion, can only exist at the level of the national community, where there's a demos, a people who are willing to accept majority rule because it's their community, their people. The Irish people want to be ruled by the Irish government that they elect. But at the EU level, of course, that is not the case. You have supranational rule, and nowadays, in fact, the vast majority of our economic laws and many of our social laws come from Brussels. There's something like 100,000 legal acts that are binding in Ireland. Many of these are standards of one kind or another that we have to obey as European standards, and if the Irish state doesn't obey them, it's subject in principle to fines, and often heavy fines. This is far from the unfettered control of Irish destinies, which the people who signed the 1916 proclamation way back 100 years or more ago did in order to establish an independent Irish state. So all over Europe, of course, people are reacting against this supranationalism, and they want to get their democracy back, their national independence back. And you have new movements being formed, of which in Ireland this is one. I thought that I might just try and devote myself to two factual points. I can talk about virtually any aspect of the EU. I've been concerned with it for many a long year. I got a job in Trinity College way back in 1961. My first political act as a young junior lecturer was to organise a collective letter to the Irish Times. And 1961 was the year that Britain applied to join the EEC, and Ireland and Denmark did so simultaneously with it. The United Kingdom, the UK, Britain and the North applied to join, and we did the same. And I organised a collective letter, signed among others by the late Noel Brown, the late Michael Mullen, a well-known trade unionist, and by Mr. Barry Desmond, former Minister for Health, and who was later head of the European Court of Auditors. They all signed that letter way back in '61. This state only joined, of course, in '73 because de Gaulle kept Britain and with Ireland and Denmark out twice during the '60s. And then I got involved in these court cases, as our chairman mentioned. I'd just like to deal with two factual issues, which I think a lot of people may not know. You can talk say an awful lot of things about the EU. First of all, it's myth of origin. Every state or aspiring state has some, what I call a myth of origin, a story, sometimes true, sometimes false, or a mixture of both, as to how it came into being. And the myth of origin of the European Union is that it was a great peace project to bring about, to prevent Europe's wars, and particularly to prevent wars in France and Germany. And it's holding Europe's peace. It's essentially a peace project, and that's the key element of the propaganda for the EU. And many people who don't really know how the EU works, which is fairly complex in some ways, fall back on that. Oh, it's a peace project. In fact, I'll just give you a few basic points. The origins of the EU were in war preparations. So way back in 1949, after the war, you had, of course, the world divided into two superpowers, the United States of America and the USSR. And the Cold War was beginning, and NATO was founded in 1949, and the Americans particularly wanted Germany to be rearmed as part of NATO for 1949. And the French were very upset at the idea of Germany being rearmed only 4 or 5 years after the Germans had occupied France. That was late 40s. So Jean Monnet produced this plan which would overcome French reluctance to rearm in the context of NATO and the Cold War, namely from the coal and steel community, whereby the French and the Germans and the Benelux, Holland, Belgium and Luxembourg would pool their coal and steel industries and put them under a supranational high authority that would make laws for them. And Monnet became the secretary of the supranational high authority, which later merged with the European Commission. So that was the first step towards supranationalism, where a supranational body was set up, the high authority of the coal and steel community, under the 1951 Treaty of Paris. And that was the first supranational element, and it was to overcome French reluctance to accept German rearmament. That was pushed by the United States of America. And then we followed on the common market in 1957 and so on and so forth. But so that's an important point to bear in mind, that the origins really of the EU is not so much in peaceful preparation, but preparation for a war, for a Cold War, or to rearm Germany, etc. And the second big development in EU history, 40 years after that, was the establishment of the euro. the euro currency, which occurred, of course, the treaty was the Treaty of Maastricht in 1992, which gave us the euro currency. The actual currency didn't come into being until the end of the 90s, 1999, but the actual treaty, which provided for its coming into being, was the Treaty of Maastricht, 1992, just a year or two after the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. And of course the French were very upset at the reunification of Germany, which occurred as a result of the collapse in Eastern Europe. Germany is united as one state. De Gaulle once said, "I like the Germans so much, I prefer two of them." So when Germany was united, the French were more happy than it was reunited. And Mitterrand went off to try and see if Gorbachev could rather to stop it. Mrs. Thatcher wasn't too happy either, British Prime Minister at the time. But nothing would stop the reunification of Germany. And the Germans, of course, knew that the French were upset at this, because suddenly they had a new German state, a unified German state. Two states became one. The old East Germany was amalgamated with West Germany. And there were suddenly 20 million more citizens in the German Federal Republic. And it was in that context that the idea of the euro was launched as a way of overcoming French reluctance or French unhappiness at the reunification of Germany. And the deal done was that the Germans would give up the Deutschmark, which is the great symbol of their post-war economic achievement, and pool the running of this new currency with the French and others. And the French in turn would walk towards a common foreign policy and a common security and military policy with the Germans. Political union for monetary union for political union, as it was put at the time, or put crudely, the Deutschmark for the euro bond. Because of course there is not yet a European army, and there's not yet but they're now talking about it quite openly. Because the Germans, of course, are economically much stronger than the French. There are more of them. There's 20 million more. They have the largest block of votes in the EU Council of Ministers. But they don't have a nuclear weapon, and they're precluded by the post-war treaties from having nuclear weapons. But the French, of course, have a nuclear weapon. So I think this new talk about a European army, which Macron said he wanted the other day, the other week, and Mrs. Merkel echoed it 3 or 4 days ago. Macron said we want the European army to defend ourselves against the Russians and the Americans. Astonishing statement. Because the Americans came to French and British help during World War I and II. So when Macron said we want a European army, and he actually said to defend ourselves against the Russians, the Chinese and the Americans, I haven't seen any signs that they're going to attack the French, but they want the European army, and of course there's the military-industrial complex and a lot of powerful interests like arms orders and so on. But that's the French have the nuclear weapon, and so down the road I wouldn't be surprised if there's a push towards much closer military cooperation and probably establishment of the European army, which would entail, of course, a European nuclear weapon. And so that's a very important development. Because, of course, the Franco-German couple run the European show, more or less. Anything they want, they can really push through. They push through the euro in that context, or they don't want to push through this militarization of the European Union. And they can prevent things that they don't want from happening. And that's actually spread out in the voting system. And the Treaty of Lisbon revised the voting system in the EU for making European laws. It's basically a population voting system now, with the Germans having 16% of the vote out of the total, and the French, British and Italians having 12% each, and we have less than 1% of the vote when they have votes. But votes are not very common in the European Council of Ministers in making EU laws. But there's a continual process of everyone looking around to see who's backing a particular project, what do I call shadow voting, and if there's enough people to push through a particular law, it goes through. The things are rarely put to a vote because smaller states aren't going to cause trouble or insist on votes if they're going to lose them. So it's a myth that the EU is essentially a peace project. Has it prevented wars in Europe? Well, the most important wars in Europe in the last 30 years have been the war in Yugoslavia. The breakup of Yugoslavia entailed a vicious civil war between the Serbs on one hand and the Croats on the other. And of course you had the overthrow of the government in Ukraine in 2014 and the breakaway of the eastern provinces of Ukraine, where they all talk Russian, or mostly talk Russian. Both of these developments were strongly encouraged by the EU, particularly by Germany. Germany played a big role in the breakup of Yugoslavia, and the French and British were not too happy about it, but they went along and out to preserve the facade of EU unity way back in 1991. Mr. Hermann Genscher, who was German foreign minister at the time, wrote his memoirs. The breakup of Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia is a great victory for German foreign policy. We have liquidated the heritage of World War I, because of course Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia were two states that were set up on the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 as a result of World War I, but they've been broken up in the last 10 or 12 years. And Germany played a key role in doing that there, more easy, better able to take over smaller countries economically than big ones. Won't go into that in detail, but the idea that that the EU is a peace project is really naive, utterly naive. If you look at its historical origins, or some of the more recent developments in relation to Yugoslavia and even Kosovo and the Ukraine. So that's one bit of information. Perhaps some may not agree with these judgments, but I think one can sustain them. The second point I'd like to put before you is this question of EU citizenship. The Treaty of Lisbon, remember, we voted against it in 2008 by a majority of voters turned out, the majority of the electorate, actually 54% of them, of the voters turned out. It's quite high for a national referendum. And they voted no to the Treaty of Lisbon in 2008, and then of course all hell broke loose, and the establishment in Ireland and the other states pushed it through a second time without a single change of a jot or tittle in the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty, as you may recall, or some of you will remember that incident, was the EU constitution, because the people who have been pushing the EU project all along want to establish an EU federation. I mentioned earlier on the coal and steel community set up in 1951 in order to pool the coal and steel industries, France, Germany and Benelux, to reconcile France to German rearmament. That was done, the Schuman Declaration, which proposed this, was issued on May the 9th, 1950. And that is Europe Day to this day. The EU every year commemorates, has a special celebration of Europe Day to commemorate the launch of the Schuman Declaration, which was this big first step towards supranationalism. And the Schuman Declaration said, this is the first step towards the Federation of Europe. That's in the Schuman Declaration. And that is celebrated each year as Europe Day, May the 9th, each year in Brussels, and those who follow Brussels' notions. The first step, the Federation of Europe. A federation is, of course, a state. So the aspiration to turn, to pool the major components of government at supranational level among the main states, among the relevant states of Europe, into a supranational federation has been there all along. And it's hugely progressed. The attainment of the currency was, of course, a major step in that direction. Mr. Prodi, former President of the European Commission, said the two pillars of the nation state are the sword, an army, a police force to enforce the law, and the currency. If you try and produce your own currency, you're liable to be arrested for counterfeiting. And the sword, the police and army, are there to stop all the currency structure. And every independent state has its own currency, and with it control of its rate of interest, or its credit control, and its exchange rate. If you don't have a currency of your own, you have no control of the rate of interest, you have no control of the exchange rate, which is very important for influencing competitive exchanges with other countries. So, of course, as you know, not all member states of the EU have given up their own currencies. There are 28 member states in the EU, 19 are in the Eurozone, the countries that use the euro, including us. There's the United Kingdom, Britain and the North of Ireland, of course, isn't. Our genius politicians joined the euro on the assumption the British were going to do so in a year or two. And we will show how communitaire we are by going first. This was way back in 1998 when the decision had to be taken, and the new currency was launched in 1999. And of course, by doing so, we made a huge blunder, in my opinion, because we tied our currency to an area, to a state, or an area, the Eurozone, with which we do only 2/3 of our trade. If you add exports and the Republic's exports and imports together, and they're about 2/3 of our trade is outside the Eurozone. As the countries that are in the Euro, we tied our currency to the currency of an area with which we do only 1/3 of our trade. That's extraordinary. Of course, if the United Kingdom had joined, it would be different. The United Kingdom didn't. If the United Kingdom had joined the Euro, we'd have tied our currency to an area with which we do 2/3 of our trade. The British didn't. Our politicians said, oh, of course, so we'll go first. And of course, we've had the likes of the euro, which probably most important, was the way we reacted to the economic crisis of 2008. You may remember when the collapse happened in 2008 and various banks went bust, above all Anglo-Irish Bank, which was loaded up with bad debts, which had Property Developers Bank, full of bad debts, which had borrowed hugely abroad for on-lending to the Irish property market. Mr. Trichet, who was then governor of the central bank, said no European bank, no Eurozone bank must be let go bust. Because if Anglo-Irish Bank is let go bust, then those who lent money to it won't be repaid, and contagion was spread to other Eurozone countries. And so as a result of that decision, Anglo-Irish, of course, was full of bad debts. He said, during the boom, of course, the Irish banks, particularly Anglo-Irish, but also Bank of Ireland and the Allied Irish banks, but Anglo Bank was, of course, the principal one. It was primarily a property developers bank. It didn't have a branch in every high street or every main street and so on. But it had borrowed hugely from the French, German and British banks for on-lending to the Irish property market. And so, well, the only way that it could prevent it from going bust and ensuring that those it had borrowed from were repaid was to load the debts of Anglo-Irish Bank and the other banks onto Irish taxpayers. And 64 billion of bad debts of the Irish banks were loaded on, particularly Anglo-Irish, were loaded onto the Irish taxpayers, of which about 40, it looks as if, well, some have been properties, some of the properties that the banks had been sold off. And it looks like a net bill for Irish taxpayers of around 40 billion. And that was insisted on by the European Central Bank. So Irish taxpayers took on board the bad debts of the Irish banks, ensuring thereby that the British, French and German banks that had lent to the Irish banks were repaid. This is one of the pleasures, we call it that, of being in the Eurozone. One of the consequences, which not really even forgotten now, but it's a fact that we're paying still for that delight. But as I said, the move towards a federation has gone on apace over the decades as more and more competences have been transferred from the national state level to the supranational level, where they're exercised in Brussels by committees which are not responsive to any democratic body. The national states have been hollowed out. I mean, formally they exist still. The Supreme Court is there, but it's no longer supreme because in a nation, anything has to do with European law. It's the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. The European Court of Justice is supreme. The Irish Dáil no longer makes most of the laws. Much of its time is passed in turning European law into local statutory instruments, that is, local laws that implement European laws. EU directives. A directive is something that Brussels decides and that is left to the national state to apply locally, but the national state must apply it. Otherwise it's subject to heavy fines. And so national states have been hollowed out substantially. The Supreme Courts are no longer supreme. Legislatures no longer make most of the laws. As I said earlier on, there's 100,000 legal acts of one kind or another that are supranational in character. We no longer sign trade agreements of our own. That's done if you're a customs union. You have a common external tariff around the whole EU, and the EU does the trade agreements on behalf of all 28 states as the customs union, which the original Treaty of Rome was a customs union, and this is the kind of thing that Mrs. May is proposing to sign the United Kingdom into indefinitely, it looks like, under the agreement that's caused so much controversy. And then, of course, the core states of the euro have got their own currency. So this move towards what do I call supranationalism has been going on for a long time. And the latest stage is this talk about possibly moving towards a European military force, which would enable the Germans at last to have their fingers on a nuclear trigger. But way back in 2004, the EU states agreed on the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe. That was the title of it. Giscard d'Estaing, who was the French president at the time, compared it to the United States of America, Philadelphia, where the United States come together to set up the United States of America. So the treaty established a constitution for Europe. And the first article of this said, this treaty establishes the European Union. But that treaty was rejected by the French and Dutch in referendums in 2004. No, 2005. And then that was a bad blow to those who wanted the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe. So the provisions of the treaty were presented as amendments to existing treaties in the Treaty of Lisbon. And 99% of the Treaty of Lisbon was, in effect, the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe. And it established the European Union as a legal entity for the first time. Before that, the European Union did not have legal personality. The European Community was the supranational body. But the Treaty of Lisbon, previously the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe, abolished the European Community and replaced it by the European Union. So now the Irish state is not a sovereign state anymore, it's part of a union of states, the European Union. And we're all citizens of that. Classical federal constitutions mean that sovereignty is divided at the federal level and the local or provincial level. And that citizens have two citizenships, the federal citizenship and the local citizenship. And the Treaty of Lisbon, previously the Treaty establishing a constitution for Europe, did that with the EU. It gave us all real citizenship. You can only be a citizen of a state. Citizenship implies statehood. You're a citizen of a state. And this is a very important development. It was hardly discussed during the Treaty of Lisbon referendum, but it's legally and politically very important that we now have two citizenships, as in any classical federal constitution. In the United States of America, everyone in America is a citizen of the United States of America, the Federal Union of America. They also are citizens of New York, or Denver, or Colorado, or California, or Texas. You're a citizen of the local state as well. Most people don't know that, but that's a fact. You have two citizenships because sovereignty is divided between the federal and the local level. In the Federal Republic of Germany, you're a citizen of the Federal Republic of Germany, but you're also a citizen of Brandenburg, or Hamburg, or Baden, or Württemberg, or whatever the local states are, the lender of the Federal Republic of Germany. So the European Union has got that characteristic. It's got a federal constitution with two citizenships, and if there's any conflict in the rights and duties of between the rights and duties of the federal level and the local level, any conflict, the form of primacy. Because the characteristic of EU law is that EU law, in relation to anything in the treaties, has primacy over national law in case of any conflict. So we're now a real citizen of a foreign entity, if you like, or an entity that's certainly not, of which Ireland is 1% of the vote, and where most people, decisions are taken by people whom we don't, of course, elect and so on. And there is, of course, a reaction against the process all over Europe, as people realise a loss of democracy, a loss of independence, loss of the ability to take decisions, loss of the ability to control their politicians, loss of the ability to, if they don't like the laws they make, periodically dismiss them or not elect them. There's a reaction everywhere. The new party in Germany, the AfD, the Lega party in Italy, and so on and so forth. And here, of course, this important development, this Irexit movement, is full of importance for the future, in my opinion. And just the last few comments on the current state of play in relation to the Brexit treaty, or the Brexit referendum, or Brexit business. That, of course, is a very bad blow to the United Kingdom. That one state, actually the EU, that one state, a major member of the EU, should seek to leave it. But there's consternation, really, in EU circles at the British vote, and consternation in Irish circles, because we assumed that they would stay in. And I believe every attempt has been made to ensure that this will not happen, that the Brexit process will be aborted in some way, or prevented, or headed off, or that if it does come off, that it will only be Brexit in name only, and that the United Kingdom, Britain and Northern Ireland would remain as closely attached as possible to the EU and the existing regime as much as possible, the customs union, single market and all the rest of it. Mrs. May's Lancaster House speech last year said that we wanted the United Kingdom, she said that Brexit means Brexit, Brexit should mean leaving the common market, the customs union, because the Treaty of Rome was originally a customs union with the protected agricultural policy attached. and the single market, which entails a vast corpus of rules and regulations to harmonise this, that and the other, and to ensure goods are harmonised and the production of exchange of goods is harmonised throughout the Union, throughout the EU. But she had, of course, that disastrous election, which was helpful for her, and then she seems to have handed over the negotiating of this agreement between the United Kingdom and the EU to Sir Humphrey Appleby, otherwise the big man in Westminster, otherwise known as Oliver Robbins. In other words, she's handed it over to the civil service. The civil service, overwhelmingly Remainers, of course, as she was herself, and produced a document which they hope would keep the EU as close as possible to the existing situation. Our people in Dublin, of course, want that as much as well. And I believe that the so-called backstop of the North of Ireland is purely a device to try and keep the EU as close as possible, keep the British and Irish states as close as possible to the EU. North-South trade is tiny in proportion to total EU trade. Even North-South trade is quite modest in comparison with trade in the North of Ireland and mainland Britain. And but the idea of the only way, the suggestion is the only way we can ensure that there's no barriers and no new barriers or controls north and south is if the existing situation remains as close as possible in what it is, that the new situation remains as close as possible to what it is. In other words, that you don't have any change in the customs regime or the rules and regulations governing the single market and so on and so forth. And so from the point of view of the Irish establishment and those who want minimum change, that was a very view, and the Protestant people are delighted. Of course, it's created a huge reaction in the Conservative Party, and is unlikely to pass through the House of Commons. There was a great triumph the other day on the newspapers. Suddenly, they realised that, of course, the objections in the House of Commons are among various interests, both on the Conservative side and the Labour side, and indeed many Remainers are dismayed about this particular deal. They say it won't go through the House of Commons. Does that mean that you'll have a so-called sudden or hard Brexit with Britain leaving the EU at the end of March? Because legally, Britain must leave, the United Kingdom must leave the EU at the end of March, under the Article 50 provision, which provides for that under the Treaty of Lisbon. And so you have today's headlines, a fear of a hard border. The delight of the other day is changing to a certain disquiet. Hard border looming, says the Irish Independent. No deal will trigger hard border, says the Irish Examiner. The Irish Daily Mail. If May can't pass our deal, we'll have to police the border. That is, of course, the fear of the Irish establishment. That if the United Kingdom really leaves the EU, if it does leave the customs union and single market, there certainly would have to be some new controls on trade and tariffs and all the rest of it. And if we want to stay in the EU, well then we'll be adding new dimensions to partition. We will be responsible. The only way of if Britain really leaves the EU, or the United Kingdom really leaves the EU, the only way of ensuring that there's no problems in North-South, no new barriers between North and South, no new partition, is that we leave as well, obviously. That fear has animated the whole Brexit process, the whole negotiation. The British and the Irish government, the EU Commission and the Irish government are very well aware that if there was a real Brexit with Britain leaving the United Kingdom, leaving the single market and the customs union, that it would mean significant new additions to the border north and south, and that this would have an inevitable reaction in southern public opinion over time. And people here would say, well, shouldn't we leave too? Because you have new partition, which the Irish government will be responsible for by the decision to stay in the EU. That is the real point. If May can't pass the deal, we'll have to police the border. So whether that comes about, no one can say. But I think my own belief is that Britain will leave, or the United Kingdom will leave the EU. The late Desmond Greaves, a well-known historian, once said, all significant debates in British politics take place inside the Tory party, with everyone else having bit parts. On the big issues, the Corn Laws of the 19th century, imperial preference at the end of the 19th century, appeasement of Germany in the 30s, you know, mainstream Tories were for appeasement, Churchill was the dissenter, and of course relations with the EU over the last 50 years. It was the Tories under Heath brought the United Kingdom, Britain into the EU, and it's the Conservatives under Mrs May, or whoever may succeed her, who want to bring her out. I believe the Conservatives, they thought when they were originally joining the EU that they'd either split France from Germany, or else they'd be co-opted by France and Germany and running the whole show as a kind of triumvirate. I think that was the original idea, because Macmillan was the first person to orient the UK toward joining the EU after the Suez debacle, and the Americans pushed Macmillan in that direction, Kennedy and so on. But, and then just Heath brought Britain into the EU, but they went for political reasons. They'd lost confidence in their capacity to be an independent state. The economy had been going downhill for years before, and they'd either divide France and Germany, or else be co-opted by France and Germany and running the whole show together as a trio. Both those visions have failed. France and Germany have stuck close together. The balance of power has shifted between them. Now the Germans are on top. It used to be the French. Now that after the reunification of Germany, it's Germany's running the show, or with France holding on to its coattails. So France has a nuclear weapon, which Germany hasn't got, so France still has some cards to play. So Britain failed to divide, and so a shift of opinion within the Tory party over years, I know quite a number of people involved, has occurred, and I believe that the Conservative Party will bring Britain and the United Kingdom as a whole out of the EU in due course. We can't say at this moment in time how. We know the situation is rather up in the air. Will Mrs May survive? If she's replaced by somebody else, can they get some other deal? But our people are rather scared that some other deal might be significantly worse. It would be significantly worse than what was agreed the other day. And a hard Brexit would put us on the spot and put our government, our establishment on the spot. But of course it would enable the state to get back control of its own laws and control of its own policies. Of course, a big problem is the euro. We did join the euro, which is an extra dimension of difficulty if we want to leave the EU. The UK doesn't have the euro. And of course, realistically, for us to leave the EU, you'd also have to leave the euro, of course. There's no provision for leaving the euro on its own. It means leaving the EU and re-establishing its own currency. There's a strong argument for the value and benefit of that. Because of course we're stuck with an overvalued currency, the euro, which is really not very helpful for us in many ways. And particularly if sterling goes down and the dollar goes down, it's going to put us more or expose us under greater pressure. And of course Europe is no longer the cash cow which it was for so long. But these are issues which now Herman and Declan will be discussing down the road. I hope I put some points before you that have some use or interest. Thank you very much.
After our next speaker, we will take a little break where you will have time, those of you who have been given forms on your way in, and you can conclude your membership with the guys on the desk during the break and prior to the debate, which I'm sure everybody is eager to witness. So for the final speaker for this part of the event, let me introduce a 21-year-old son of a Jamaican immigrant, co-founder of Civil Right Media, and Conservative Comeback Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Scally.
I'm here to cause trouble, so I'm just going to get that out of the way now. Can everybody hear me? Can you all hear me okay? Okay, perfect. I thought it was quite funny that at the end of my last speech in Dublin in September, I briefly called out Angela Merkel at the end, and shortly after she announced her resignation. So I could be humble and put that down to coincidence, but I'm going to take credit for that right here. So if you have any politicians whose careers you'd like me to end, be sure to just send me an email or something and I'll see what I can do. Oh yeah, sort of. I'm on it. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for coming out here today. I'd also like to thank Herman, my fellow speakers, and the organisers for putting together this great event. And lastly, I'd like to thank Mr. Declan Ganley for agreeing to debate this issue, even though I don't agree with his stance on the EU. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Ganley. His speech at the Rally for Life a couple of years ago was one of the most inspiring things I've ever heard. I think I listened to that so many times that I almost accidentally memorized it. He's a big critic of Marxism and crony corporatism like myself, and he's a God-fearing man, so we have that in common too. So thank you, sir, for your service to Irish society over so many years. I think it's great that when we come to a point of disagreement, we can debate with reasonable people at an event like this, and I think it's a very healthy sign for our society. As for me, as Kay Lawley said, my name is Ben Scallon. Some of you may know me from the Facebook page Conservative Comeback Ireland, and also Civil Right Media, where we try to provide Irish people with a reasonable centre-right perspective on current affairs. So if you're sick of the mainstream media and their far-left stranglehold on information, you can check us out at facebook.com/civilrightmedia and also facebook.com/irishcomeback. Because the truth is important and people have a right to hear it regardless of whose sensibilities it offends.
Here, here.
And that actually is one of the biggest differences between us and the people who currently run the European Union. We believe that ordinary people are entitled to hear the truth and to be given the full story before they make up their mind on important issues. But too many people in the EU and in our own government don't agree with this idea, it seems. One of these people is the President of the EU Commission, Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker. The Daily Telegraph quotes him as saying, in reference to the Lisbon Treaty, "Of course there will be transfers of sovereignty, but would I be intelligent to draw the attention of the public to this fact?" Now, leaving aside the question of Mr. Juncker's intelligence, we're not even going to go there. Bear in mind that this is the same Lisbon Treaty that the Irish people voted against until we were undemocratically forced to vote again. And Juncker openly admits that there was a transfer of sovereignty from the member states to the European Union. So if that's not outrageous to you, I don't know what is, to be frank. But this is not the only time that Mr. Juncker has let something like that slip. I suppose that it's hard to keep a secret when you're tipsy all the time, but there you go. Actually, as a brief aside, I will say that I admire his ambition. It seems that he's decided to deal with Europe's wine lake all on his own, so you can't fault the man for trying. But in another off-guard moment, the unelected head of Europe said, "We decide on something, leave it lying around and wait to see what happens. If no one kicks up a fuss because most people don't understand what's been decided, we continue step by step until there is no turning back." These are all real quotes, by the way. These are from the Telegraph. I'll link the sources below when the video goes up online so that you can see it for yourself. But what we're seeing here is this man's idea of democracy. This is what informed consent looks like in the European Union. Regarding the referendum on the EU Constitution back in 2005, he said, "If it's yes, we say on we go. If it's a no, we say we continue." So, in other words, they will proceed whether the people of Europe want it or not. The referendum is all a farcical show to keep us placated, so we feel like we have control over our countries, while the elites really just do whatever the hell they want, and our vote is essentially meaningless. And we've heard that again recently, haven't we? What's it they're saying now regarding Brexit? That the UK needs to have a second referendum, a so-called people's referendum, as if the first one wasn't somehow. Very unusual that the side backed by billionaire elitists like George Soros is the side of the people, while the side that got the majority vote isn't. But there you go, that's the world we live in, I suppose. So then, returning to Mr. Juncker, the man with the 5-year plan, let's consider what we've just heard. So he admits openly that the EU is trying to deceive the people of Europe, and that there was a transfer of national sovereignty from the member states to Brussels, all while pretending that there wasn't. If the EU is so good for us, why all the lies? Because he knows that the people of Europe love their nations and don't want to be part of a European superstate. He knows that the people of Europe value their national sovereignty and don't want their countries to become mere vassals of the European empire that he's constructing. That is Mr. Juncker's true vision of Europe, and that is the Europe that we are moving towards as we speak. Now, I have to take one part of that back. I said that people in Europe value their national sovereignty, and that's of course a generalization. It really depends who you're talking about. If you're talking about, say, Micheál Martin of the Fianna Fáil party, then maybe national sovereignty isn't so much of a priority. I'm sure we're all familiar with that infamous speech he gave where Micheál said that Ireland wanted nothing to do with a quote-unquote backward-looking idea of sovereignty, and that he remained absolutely committed to the ideals of the European Union. Well, actually, he said Ireland remained absolutely committed to the European Union. I put the question to you now. Does Micheál Martin speak for the people of this country?
No.
I didn't think so either. Here's a man who can't lead his own party, yet who presumes to lead the nation. A man whose shameful betrayal of the traditions of Fianna Fáil on the 8th Amendment alone make him morally unfit to hold any office in the state. I think somebody should inform Mick that we did away with kings quite some time ago in this country, and that he doesn't speak for the people of Ireland. We do. Irish sovereignty is gone when the people of Ireland say it's gone, and let me tell you, that will be a cold day in hell. It's not up to turncoat TDs, spineless Shanadors, or any Bolsheviks in Brussels. This is the very same crowd who have just signed away our neutrality with this new PESCO agreement right under our noses. So now, just earlier this week, we have both Merkel and Emmanuel Macron, the French soybean-in-chief, both calling for the creation of a true European army. Somebody should tell Mr. Macron that just because you're a French manlist, that does not make you Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the same man who got caught spending 40 grand on makeup. That's actually true, you can look that up. He's also compared himself to Jupiter, the Roman king of the gods, but if you look at his abysmal approval ratings, you'll see that the only similarity between himself and Jupiter is that they're both gas giants. Yet despite all of that, we are now eligible for this European army with him at the helm. So let's be clear about one thing. There are millions of Irish men and women who would happily rush to defend Ireland if it needed them, myself included. I've yet to meet anyone from any country who'd be willing to die for the European Union. This is Ireland. Our anthem is Arrow on the Vein, and our flag is the tricolour. We are Irish first and foremost. This is not a claim of superiority, as some of the media would like to paint it, but merely a proclamation of who we are. To quote an excerpt from a poem that my father wrote when I was very young, we do not claim a greater status, do not claim we are better men, only that by our own labours may the world be great again. You see, all of these recent developments are not a coincidence. In my last speech at the Dublin conference in September, I said that the passing of the EU's Article 13 would be the first step on the road to censorship, and that they would inevitably, in the long run, want to control our speech and the content that we consume. And at the time, some critics called me an alarmist and said that I was blowing things out of proportion. This was a ridiculous notion that could never happen. Well, right on cue, just the other week, the so-called European Court of Human Rights decided to uphold a decision in Austria to convict a woman for criticising somebody's religion. So while the people of Ireland were going to the polls to decide whether or not we'd remove blasphemy from our own constitution, it turns out that the European courts had already made our mind up for us and replaced religious blasphemy with secular blasphemy. Every week, it seems, the EU further restricts our rights as individuals and as free nations. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads us to where we are now. Is it any wonder why they hate us? When it comes to the EU, you can forget the freedom to prosper. They don't even want to give you the freedom to speak. The mask of the cultural Marxists has finally slipped. They've allowed their true agenda to come out. And it's not the virtuous agenda that they've been trying to sell us for so long. These European Unionists wouldn't know true virtue if it bit them. To steal a phrase from the eminent Oscar Wilde, they know the price of everything and the value of nothing. They believe in nothing. They create nothing. All they do is take from vibrant businesses. They never make any of their own. Many of these world leaders have no stake in the future because they haven't created any children of their own. What do they care if the world goes to hell in a handcart? They'll be long gone. What do Leo Varadkar, Simon Harris, and Mary McAleese all have in common? Well, a lot of answers spring to mind, but for the sake of the children watching, I'll hold my tongue. But the truth is, they all claim to support the right to life of little unborn babies until it was politically expedient, and then they flipped on a dime. I mean, if a radical was a shoe, he'd be a flip-flop. The man has never taken a moral stance in his life. It was just announced that under the government's new abortion regime, GPs will be paid €400 per abortion. So, 450. Well, that's the price of an Irish citizen's life to these people. That's the situation we're in now. If that is what they're willing to do to the most innocent and vulnerable among us, what would they be willing to do to you or I? What would they be willing to do to our country? Is this really the best that Ireland can muster? I don't think it is. I think more highly of us than that. And thankfully, we aren't the only people in Europe who've had enough with the current system. Just last week, the proud people of Poland had their Independence Day, where 200,000 Polish citizens turned out on the streets of Warsaw to assert their love for their great culture and to celebrate their hard-won liberty from so many authoritarian regimes in history. The Nazis, the Communists, the Ottoman Empire, they beat them all and more. And they're proud of their history, and rightly so. So how did the media try to spin this positive event? Oh, look at these fascists and xenophobes and racists and blah, blah, blah. All the typical NPC outrage that we've come to expect from the media. Because apparently, according to these people, being proud of your culture means that you automatically must hate everybody else's. That's the way these people really think the world works. I mean, Kate mentioned my mother's from Jamaica. I still get accused of being a xenophobe by these people. That's the caliber of intellectual that we're dealing with. You know, these people are not deep thinkers. They'd find a piece of sandpaper and think it was a map of the Sahara. So... But let's not overlook the irony here that pro-EU journalists who support an anti-democratic socialist superstate run by Germany, which wants to attack Russia after crushing Poland and Hungary, are the same people accusing everyone else of being fascists. That is a remarkable take on the situation, if I do say so myself. If that's not an exercise in Orwellian doublethink, then I don't know what is. Being proud of your country and history is nothing to be ashamed of. It doesn't matter if you're from Poland or Ireland or anywhere else. I wouldn't ask anyone to give up their nationality or their heritage. I love Ireland and I'm proud of it. I'm not a European, whatever that means. I'm an Irishman and I will be until the day I die. Historically, this beautiful island has always moved the world to achieve great and mighty things. We're the descendants of high kings and rebels, warrior women, saints and explorers. Our mothers and fathers defeated the biggest empire in history. If we ever start to doubt ourselves, all we need to do is look at what our forebears have achieved. In every field of human endeavour, Ireland has played a part in advancing the welfare of mankind. In medicine, our own Francis Rind, a Dublin doctor, invented the hypodermic syringe. In science, John Joly gave the world colour photography, the stethoscope, the induction coil, even the submarine. These were all Irish inventions. Edmund Burke's political ideas are championed all over the world, and our playwrights, poets and authors are the stuff of legend on the world stage. Humanitarians, musicians, explorers, revolutionaries, missionaries, all of these are gifts from Ireland to the world in just the last few hundred years alone. That is why I'm proud to be Irish, and it's why I'm convinced that even now, our best is yet to come. We've proven time and time again that Ireland's potential is limitless when we're free from the chains of foreign control. But that potential can only be realised when you and I have the courage to stand up. They think that we're so brainwashed by cultural Marxism that we've forgotten who we are. Well, I haven't forgotten. When Europe was a wasteland ravaged by barbarians after the fall of Rome, who came to save this great continent? Who gave it back its learning and its history and brought the people of Europe back from the brink of destruction to restore our civilization? The so-called backward Irish, that's who. The saints and scholars of the Emerald Isle. People just like you and I. That's who saved Europe. And we can do it again. We Irish have been standing up to injustice like this since time immemorial. This is nothing new to us. So we here in this room may not have started the movement for Irish freedom, but you mark my words, we will damn well finish it. It angers me deeply that so many good and decent and gentle people have been pushed further and further to the edges of our society, hiding from a politically correct mob and afraid to speak the truth. I've spoken to so many people at events like this that come up to me or they send me an email and they tell me they're afraid. Some of the nicest, most reasonable, most compassionate people you could ever meet. Not a racist or hateful bone in their body. And yet they're scared to speak up, even though they're right, because they know the social consequences when you say these things in public. That is unacceptable in a civilized society. It's unacceptable in Ireland, and I won't stand for it. These globalists have seen how far we're willing to go for a quiet life, just to not be harassed and ostracized for speaking our minds. They've seen what we'll do for comfort. So I ask you now, what would you do for freedom? Will we slink away somewhere and hide and watch this once grand country grow dim before our eyes? Or are we willing to go that extra mile and do the impossible for Ireland once again? I'm telling you now, we so often underestimate ourselves. We don't know what we're capable of until we try. And here's the best part, neither do they. I'll be wrapping up now in a moment, but there's an old Irish song that I was always very fond of growing up, and the lyrics go, "At Easter 1916, when Pearse called them out, the men from the Dublin battalion rode out, and in that post office they nobly did show how a handful of heroes could outfight the foe." Well, looking out at this brave crowd that we have here today, you look like more than a handful of heroes to me. And if the latest polls are to be believed, there are over 1 million Irish heroes at our backs, not to mention the millions of supporters we have overseas. The great St. Patrick saved this entire island in a single lifetime. One man with the will to try. We have friends and supporters in every continent on earth who want us to succeed and are willing to help. We owe it to them, and we owe it to ourselves and the unborn generations of Irish to come to claim our freedom and theirs. So stand up, Irish heroes, and make your voices heard. Join a party that's willing to tell these globalists what we think of them. Join for the sake of your children and for your future. This isn't over until we quit, and that's exactly what they're counting on. They say that Ireland is finished and that we may as well give up and just become homogenized Europeans. Well, they will never get that. We will never give up, and we're going to keep being proud of our country and give Juncker a headache that makes his hangovers feel tame by comparison. God bless Galway, God bless Ireland, and God bless the Irish people. Éire go bragh.
Also, Ben, your teammate is my eldest daughter. If I can get her to dump her boyfriend and be married, I'll watch you for a son-in-law. That's brought the first half of our day to a close. As I said earlier, we're going to take a break now. You can grab refreshments, the bar is open, there's some staff taking care of you out there. And for those of you, I think you all got the forms, if you want to fill out your memberships and get your cards, have a talk to the guys on the desk. And we will resume, and we will have our debate, which will be moderated by Bruce. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. So take a well-earned break now, everybody, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.
What's everybody? Did you hear that? Who says Ben can't make a speech? Hey, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to sign off and have a quick break, and I'll say we'll be resuming in about 30 minutes, and then I'll restream again. 223 in the room, 102. Thanks very much for joining me. Give me about half an hour and I'll post it out on my Twitter handle. Keep an eye on my Twitter and I'll give you a 15-minute heads up. What's everybody?